Greetings and welcome to the next episode of Hourlings Podcast Project. My name is Martin Wilsey and I'm your host. Tonight we're talking about the classic topic, show don't tell. Tonight, Jeffrey's going to be driving the bus. Jeffrey, take it away.
Thank you, Marty. I will tell you that as someone who has been running writing groups for about 10 years now, and actually between the writing groups that I run, maybe 20 years worth of experience running them, one thing that probably would be my catchphrase is show don't tell. Because many writers, when they start out, they don't realize that don't just convey what happens, give it life, give it meaning, show what people are feeling, show what people are doing and how that affects them. And don't just throw information at us, make it live. And that's what show don't tell is. Now, I want to talk about a bit about the show don't tell. So let me give you an example. Someone could write simply, Dave was hungry. That's a very passive sentence, very bland sentence. Take it up to you guys. How would you guys improve it?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways you can do it. You can start with action. Dave tore into that sandwich like he hasn't eaten for days. Or you can do it with dialogue. You know, Dave could say, "Oh, I'm so hungry, I could eat a horse," or some other cliche, or and use it with dialogue, or simply, just have the context of the entire scene show Dave being hungry. It is a pretty easy thing to avoid in this particular case. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, I was gonna say, or you could, you could loop in another character too. Say something like, Jason's eyebrows shot up when my stomach rumbled. It was so loud, or something like that. And so then you have an interaction going on with the sound.
Or the smell of the steakhouse drew him in like a moth to the flame.
Right.
Gonna have
that might be a
Describe his mouth watering.
Yeah, mouth watering is actually, perfect. You could feel his mouth filling with saliva as he began almost to drool.
Yeah, I think that there is several different ways that you can actually work. Most tells you can convey, for instance, with facial expressions or body language or stuff people say.
Right.
You're really doing. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Doing yourself a disservice if you choose something such as the dogs were excited to see me versus the dog sneezed and wiggled and ran through my legs and slobbered against my knee and all that stuff. You're choosing. I know it's very relatable to David and I who own dogs. But you're choosing a much weaker option that to use things that you might think, oh, that still gets the point across. Maybe it still conveys the message, but it does not do it with the skill that you could.
Yeah, right. In one case, you're just conveying the info. In the other case, you're painting a picture.
Sure.
You're really sparking off the imagination of the reader, which is really what you want to do consistently throughout.
Absolutely. You don't want your book just to sit there.
You can also make it humorous. You can do sort of a jump cut. The friend says, "Hey, McDonald's? Oh man, my wife doesn't allow me to eat that stuff." Next scene, there they are eating in McDonald's.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And doing cuts like that. Yeah. Sometimes you want it to clip, and then just go to the right, because sometimes it isn't what you add; it's what you remove.
Right. And the thing is, if you just say, Dave was hungry, there's a lot of missed opportunities. You could do character development, just by showing what it's like when Dave's hungry. If it's anything like it is when Marty's hungry, it could be trouble.
That's awesome. And I will say that does lead us into another. Hungry is sort of a feeling of wanting action. But what about a feeling of just pure emotion? Like Shay was happy. How can we make that one better?
I always do a specific, review of my books, looking for emotional tells. If you say, Shay is sad or Shay is happy, or anybody, you can make that much more three-dimensional for the reader by changing that up.
I also think happy, I don't know, that's an emotion that is maybe too quickly selected. There might be a more specific thing going on with that character than just happy. That maybe you need to look into a little more. I mean, sometimes I guess you could just be happy, but maybe it's actually relief, or maybe it's actually validation, or something a little more specific. And I'm not saying that you would say you would replace it by saying Shay was validated instead, but there are more interesting ways to go about describing validation or relief or something like that than just choosing a very broad sort of catch-all like happy.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, smiled glowingly and eyes widened with anticipation and stuff like that. Things that can convey happiness, especially if you just grab that emotional thesaurus. And that's one thing I would like our readers to be aware of, is there's a book called The Emotional Thesaurus, and it's in a series, things like the Abuse Thesaurus and all of these other thesauruses that you can get that are great resources, because what they do is you take an emotion, a feeling, a personality trait, you look it up in their thesaurus, and they'll give you a whole bunch of descriptions that you can have for that to convey, for instance, happiness.
Yeah, and in fact, you can drive character, you can drive plot. If you have if you do a tell that says, Lisa was scared of the dark. It is much better if you say something like the lights went out and suddenly Lisa couldn't breathe. You can actually develop character and increase tension or joy or whatever it is that you're trying to convey.
You show what they're feeling, not you're literally showing how what they're feeling is affecting them rather than describe what they're feeling.
Right. It affects them the way that I always do face, body language, and voice, the way they speak, the things they say. Which may not be related, but can be conveyed to the reader on how they say something or what exactly they say. It's really it's really important to get it right.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Something else I've seen is and this is maybe a little bit different, but let's say you have a character that's not really good at showing emotions and stuff, but you want to still show that the person's angry. So imagine that you have a main character. His best friend is going out with his ex-girlfriend, and the ex-friend is saying, and the friend is saying, "Hey, you're okay with this? I mean, you're not going out with her anymore." And the main character is going, "Yeah, no, it's fine. We're not dating. Yeah, I don't mind you going out with her." But later on at a party, you see him keying the side of his friend's car. Right? He's not fine with it. He's showing it by action, even though he's not shown it in dialogue and he's not shown it anywhere else. But the action speaks louder than words.
And develops character and can forward plot. That's why it's so important.
Yeah. And of course, there's always the, no, I'm fine with it. Don't worry about it. Shaking your head as in no, but really, saying yes.
I have that with my wife. Are you okay with this? Yes, it's fine. That's like, dude, I'm about to go in for like 24 hours of doom with my wife.
Right.
Fine is not a good word.
Nope.
At least it might differ in somebody else's marriage, but fine is not a good word in mine.
No.
Yeah, it's different in my marriage.
Oh, well, fair enough.
Brenda doesn't do that shit. No, she means what she says and says what she means.
That's good.
And that makes my life a lot happier.
That would.
It's also funny because, and my wife, if she's mad at me for 24 hours, period, end of sentence, I'm doomed.
Right.
And then she starts thinking, well, he's an idiot, but he's a good guy. Or, whatever. Oh, he might have had extenuating circumstances. oh, I didn't remind him that it was our anniversary, that type of stuff.
Well, I think that's all of us, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
all.
It's
You
the
get
type
over
of stuff that you can use.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
more what I'm trying to get across.
Absolutely.
Fine could be a code word in the relationship between two of your characters in the story. Another one for us is, yes, dear,
Mhm.
that's what your mother says. Don't ever say that to me.
Mhm.
Because that's what my mother used to say to my dad. So if I want to tease my wife, I say that. So the
Oh, wow.
point is, you can do some funny things with dialogue that provide meaning to the reader that aren't implicit in the dialogue, but you can make it say things.
Yeah, the dialogue could be saying something
Right.
different.
Jeffrey,
out of
I had a
context.
question for
Well, dialogue is perfect. I mean, but Shay, if you didn't want to go to the next topic,
No, I just had a question for you,
Yeah.
Mr. Host. I was wondering, so sometimes I will take on some new writers as like a coach, just sort of as a freelance thing. And I know that many new writers I encounter don't have much patience with show don't tell, because like we were saying earlier, they might think like, well, it's the same information. Why am I going to all this trouble to like describe this and stretch it out in a scene when I could just say it in 2 sentences? Isn't that kind of like, a waste of time, or isn't that really just redundant or too much or whatever? So what would you say to new writers who are thinking that this is really just like, why am I going around the wrong way when I could just go the short way?
Because it paints a picture in the reader's mind.
That's what I was going to go.
It is absolutely essential
Mhm.
for you to make this as cerebrally cinematic as you can get it.
Right.
And that's the difference between,
A writer and an author.
people that love books, or the story was okay, but
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy it too much.
Well, I
you
think
can have the best plot in the world. If you just tell the plot, it's a total yawn fest.
I will say it this way. I think there's a very easy way to understand it. I can draw a picture, a little woman's face with some hair coming down, nice little stick figure, with a little dress. Okay, that's my Mona Lisa. Now, mine are Da Vinci's. I just conveyed a woman, so did Da Vinci.
Yeah,
Which
I
do
do.
you like better?
Yeah, I would say that show don't tell is like. I would say that show don't tell is like one of the main characteristics that differentiate someone who just writes stuff down and someone who is an author, who is a storyteller. And so I think it's essential in that regards. And if you don't quite get it, then you need to do a little more soul searching about what you really want to do with your writing. If you really want to be a novelist, if that doesn't seem like it's very important to you, then maybe maybe you enjoy something else. I'm not saying like, hey, go do something else if you're not good at it. But if you don't feel like you have the patience for it, that you want to convey your information that way, you might need to think about it, because I do think it's that important as a writer.
It is
Right.
important.
If you're just matter of fact conveying the info, it's not going to be exciting. It's not going to be memorable in the reader's mind at all.
It's going to be a stick figure.
Now, on just to, I guess, play ping pong with myself, to oppose my point, however, I do think that some authors might take that doctrine too far and say that you can never tell. You can only show as a writer. Never tell and only show. I don't think that's true either. I do think that there are times when you can spend a paragraph telling, a background of a history or something, if it's essential to that part of the story, and then you can show another part of the scene. I don't think that, I would say, a solid maybe 75% of the time show, but I don't think that you have to 100% of the time show. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, that was a topic I was going to get to, but I guess we can bring it up now.
I don't think that any rule ever is a 100% rule.
I get you.
And I can
The thing is, you gotta know the rule so that you can break it elegantly.
There you go.
And it's not the the shows where it's critical, for instance, to be a show instead of a full tell. You know, oftentimes, you know, I've read a lot of murder mysteries, for instance, where they do a little bit of tell, because in there they just simply tell you what the evidence happens, because they don't want to give too many clues, for instance.
Mhm.
You know, and it could be a tell that it's coming out in dialogue. You know, oh, we found a flashlight at the scene. That's a pure tell. We don't have to show them finding the flashlight at a murder scene. We can just do that. But knowing how to identify tells is the kind of the skill that you need to hone.
Right.
And then you can use your own writer's voice and decide whether it's appropriate or not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because I mean, if you're finding yourself, well, no, David, go ahead. Go ahead.
An interesting one I saw recently. This is by an author named John Sanford in his, and it's a crime story called Ocean Prey. He spends about, I don't know, 3 pages going into the background of a character who encounters the crime that initiates the whole novel. So that when the crime actually happens and this character tries to intervene, we are solidly in, we understand him. He's a great guy. We understand why he's disturbed about what he's seeing. And even though he only has 2 scenes in the entire book, he stands out in my mind as a character. Now, he spent 3 pages doing a bio for this guy, but the bio was interesting, and surprising enough, it mattered to the book. There's no writing book that would have said, it's okay to do this, but it worked. So that I think the real thing is, you know, understand when you have a tell, and understand whether it's working or not working for you, or whether it would be more effective converting that tell into a show. There is no one rule that says you always have to do something a certain way if some other way will work and achieve effect that you're trying to achieve.
I mean,
I've seen it work effectively in books that actually books themselves have a narrator that is almost a character in of itself.
Mhm.
Because if you read Clockwork Orange, the character, the narrator in Clockwork Orange does a lot of telling, and the interesting thing is it's also an unreliable narrator. We could have a whole episode about narrator styles, which could be really fun.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, I love
Would
it.
be fun.
I love that book
To be
for
shown.
that reason.
Stay tuned,
But,
guys.
You know, when you know, he can sit there and say, you know, Alex loved Beethoven. That's as tell as you can get.
Mhm.
But then he goes on and demonstrably later in the story show how much he loved Beethoven and why, which is a tell that really requires a tell to can convey thought processes for that. But so you really need to know when it's okay to do it, when it's appropriate. I wish I had come up with some more examples of it prior to this episode, but you know, when you see it.
Right.
I would say that show don't tell is probably. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, please. You started first.
There can also be telling in dialogue. And the thing about people is they don't really actually usually say what they mean. They talk around things, but they don't explicitly say, "Baby, I want to take you home right now." Right? They don't. They don't.
Sometimes they do.
Well,
Sometimes, but they don't typically.
right.
And you can be clever with what people say and what they're actually revealing about themselves. Personal favorite, and I'm sure everybody will recognize it, is one character says, "I love you," and the other one says, "I know."
Mhm.
Tell me the movie.
Star Wars.
Star Wars.
Okay, one person says, "I love you," and the other one says, "Ditto." Oh, come on, Ghost with Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze.
Okay.
Right? message still gets across, but it becomes a very memorable piece of dialogue, and it's clever and it's amusing,
Mhm.
right? But it still gets the same information across. So
Right.
as a writer, you want to get certain things across, but anything that you can do to make something important memorable to the reader, even so that they remember it years later, right? That's going to help.
Yeah. Well, dialogue is an important thing to keep in mind. I mean, for instance, there might be someone who writes, well, as you know, Bob, the way we do things is that we always put the steak on top of the plate upside down. Now, as you know, Bob, is something that people fall into a crutch, saying,
Yeah.
now I'm using as you know, Bob, but Bob is a metaphor for someone that you might be telling something that they already know together. It's a way to convey information that all your characters would already know, but you want the reader to know it.
Now, I don't like that way.
Yeah, I mean, that is a tell.
It's always like, yeah, like, or like when it's watching an episode of like CIS or something, and they're like, talking to someone who's been in the, saying, as you know, we have to run this by
the
the
TV
examiner,
episodes
like,
for
whatever.
Bones and CSI, they're awful for that.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, if you're talking about dialogue, you can use tells in dialogue. If the description point for the dialogue, you can say, if you say she pursed her lips tightly and said, fine. Period. That's showing that is different than what's being said.
Whereas she has a big smile on her face.
It's a good tool.
Fine.
Really powerful tool.
So this is what I want to see in the CSI type episode. As you know, Bob, screw you, Jeff. I know how DNA sequencing works. I don't need a lecture from you.
That's right. You see that?
You can play with that.
Brenda points at the TV and yells out loud, why would one forensic examiner explain what
exactly
happening to another expert forensic examiner?
I mean, I'm being funny, but at the same time, you could literally use that in your dialogue.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you could. To sarcastically
you can get away with anything in writing if you call yourself out in it. And I use it all the time.
Keep in mind also, we're talking about two people that would know. One of the reasons why you always have Doctor Who companions is so that the doctor can explain things so the companion wouldn't know and have to convey that information just so the audience can know to that companion that wouldn't know in the first place.
Well, sure.
And that's not technically an as you know, Bob, but it still can get a little bit bogged down if it becomes an info dump. And that's another issue that I think we should discuss, which is the quintessential, the elephant in the room of the show don't tell is the info dump, where he went to the store and he had gone to the store and he had bought this and he had bought that, and then he had met the woman. All that in passive voice, in past progressive, in terms of describing it after the fact, can bog the story down. Why didn't you just show me he doing it? Why did you describe it?
It already happened. Why, if it's important, why am I not seeing it?
Exactly.
Yeah, I am a bad perpetrator of info dumps in first drafts. So, it's because, hey, I did all the research. I made all this crap up. So I'm going to explain how my faster than light drive works. And all that stuff falls on the cutting room floor.
Yep.
And just showing how it works is plenty enough to paint the picture for the reader.
Right.
If anybody's wondering why I keep going on mute and back to non-mute, my dog has allergies and he itches and the whole floor goes bump 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 bump. So I don't want our listeners to have to hear sounding like someone's trying to break down my front door and rob our riches.
Is that Pierre?
Pierre,
It's our old dog Max, who is about 13.
Oh, poor Max.
Yes, we love him, but thump thump thump. So that's what happens.
All right, well,
get that dog up.
Speaking of show don't tell, I could just say Max was itchy, but instead I said Max went thump 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 against the floor as his stomach. There you go.
Right.
The trick with an info dump, where you do need to get a lot of information across in a short period of time, is to break it up and start interspersing it amongst the action and the dialogue. And the movie that I hold up as the epitome of doing this and making us care about it is Terminator, where if you think about it, the guy from the future has a lot to explain. There are robots. They're coming after you. They're coming after you because your child is going to be the savior of all mankind. You know, if you tried putting that in an info dump, it would sound stupid. But he intersperses that between being chased and being shot at and stealing.
Exactly.
While he's crouching down in a car,
Mm-hmm.
describing they got skin, bad breath, everything.
You don't understand. It's a Terminator. It will not stop. It will never stop.
I mean,
and it's memorable, even though
an
interspersed info dump.
Absolutely, because I've seen authors, early authors, just spend half a page in one huge paragraph just to describe the scene. And no, you want to put some characters in there. Have one character interact and make reactions to the what he's been told or she's being told.
I will qualify that a little bit. I like having in a movie they would call it an establishing scene. Establishing shot is something that shows you, for instance, here's the dinner at table. Here's a family at the dinner table, and it shows you where everybody is. Now you can focus in on this person or that person or these two people, and everybody has context for where you are. I still think a scene has to give you some necessary context. You can continue to add to it throughout the scene, but it's still, I still need to know if there's three people sitting at a table having a conversation.
And absolutely, chapters will generally begin with a bit of boilerplate up at the front, and you probably aren't going to build a half a page paragraph out of that, but maybe lots of little paragraphs that are giving you the descriptive.
But just a boilerplate. If you have boilerplate, I'm not talking boilerplate.
No, absolutely not. No, I'm talking about scene setup, descriptive, unique description of this room and what's going on. I'm talking though more about info dumps that happen in the middle after we've already done all this establishing, and then just one character going off in a soliloquy.
Well, a perfect example of that is the Lord of the Rings. I mean, the amount of time that Tolkien actually spent describing elven clothes, how they're different from the Riders of Rohan. It is actually pretty amazing. Going back and reading it again, and it can be pretty funny because there's a metric ton of tell in those books.
I would say that there are some authors, however, Tom Clancy, David Weber, S.M. Sterling come to mind, that like to give some very detailed information about clothes, background, weapons, the military setup and stuff. And I think they're all pretty good writers, and they're pretty effective. Some people eat up every single word. Other people are like, okay, and they skim some of those sections, and that's up to individual preference. They're all three of the ones I mentioned are great writers, but they are what they are.
Yeah.
And they're writing for a particular audience.
Well, I will say, guys, we've had a really good conversation here. I think the big takeaway for you potential authors out there is passive description, try to avoid it, and flowery description is what you idealize.
I'll just end by saying that I think show don't tell is probably like you're going to hear it over and over and over and over and over again if you're wanting to be a writer. So it's one of the most frequently cited skills. So at least get familiar with it and get used to hearing it.
Yep.
Well, there's one last piece of trivia that when I was doing research about show don't tell. Apparently in various languages, telling is more common than showing. And in fact, it conveys into literature in certain cultures that way, and it becomes problematic in translation of books to other languages. I saw that just on, I had done just a Google search, and the top entry was Wikipedia, and it's like it had a bullet controversy. Controversy. What's controversial about show don't tell? And apparently some people are really upset about it.
That's
Well,
interesting. I think that part of that might be, like you're saying, I think it's cultural. It might be also the degree of skepticism that cultures have. Because, you know, when you're telling something, why should you believe someone that's telling you something? But when you're showing something, then you can make your own, you know, you have your own evidence to make your own conclusion. So maybe it has to do with what cultures are generally more trusting of their
Could be.
information and which ones
be.
are more
I'm
skeptical.
curious,
Well,
Marty, do you know what you...
I'd also say that writing styles have changed over time, and you can see that if
Yeah.
you start reading something from the 80s, the
Mhm.
70s, the 60s, et cetera, et cetera. And so in some cases, I think what authors have been trying to do progressively is to get the reader closer and closer to the main character, closer and more immersed into the story. And the techniques like that, they've changed how they use POV. They tend to do a lot more first person or third person close than what they used to. They've tended to move away from having a narrator or anything like that. And other cultures may not have followed along at the same pace.
Right. And but Marty, I'm curious, did you actually get a sample of what some of those languages are, what some of those cultures are that are in this?
Well, I can just read the paragraph right out of Wikipedia if you want.
All right, yeah,
2017,
yeah.
Vietnamese American writer Viet Chan Nguyen questioned the validity of continuing to teach show don't tell in creative writing classes in his New York Times op-ed on the subject. His position was that such teaching is biased against immigrant writers who may describe emotions in ways readers from outside their culture may not understand, rendering tell necessary. I don't know.
That seems like an ESL argument, English as a second
Yeah,
language.
I don't know. I'd have to go back and read the New York
Yeah.
Times op-ed, which I probably will after the show.
Interesting.
But
Well, I mean,
it's
Vietnamese-
interesting. It's a interesting writer's topic.
Well, that is a good
I
coda
swear
to
every
come up
writer is going to hear a lot about it if they
Mhm.
decide, hey, I think I'm going to write a book.
So
Yeah, you'll hear about show don't tell. Trust me.
Oh, yes. You will hear my favorite 3 words. Show don't tell.
But I think we've also kind of established already in our discussion that show don't tell is not a it's not a law. It's not something where you get
No.
fined if you don't adhere to it. It's a good practice to help you get your readers immersed in the story. But if it doesn't work, or if telling is more effective for what you're trying to accomplish in the story, then tell. But know the rules, break the rules if it makes sense.
Sometimes you got to give us some descriptions. Sometimes you got to be staccato. You can do this as long as you understand the rule, as Shay, I believe, said.
Okay. Another great show.
Thank you.
We will see you guys next week.
Another
Same
finely
bad
structured
time,
episode.
same bad channel.
Absolutely.